Releasing in Australian cinemas at Melbourne at the Nova Cinema is a new film called Petrol. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the writer-director of Petrol, Alena Lodkina. Alena, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter.
Pleasure. And I know last time we spoke was about your first feature film, Strange Colours, which was such a really powerful little film. Tell me about the process you've gone through to write and direct this new film, Petrol.
Well, some of the ideas for Petrol were in my head almost before I got working on Strange Colours. So some of the kind of core themes and having a film that is, explores the two women dynamic or is kind of centered around that narrative. I've wanted to do that for a really long time. And I think I was sketching out ideas in various shapes and forms for a very long time. And when we finished Strange Colours, I got working on the script, but it took me maybe a year or two to even get to a place where I could write out a treatment. I'm quite slow. And then around the time actually when the pandemic started, that was when I was working full-time on the script. I just started working full-time, so kind of the timing was quite fortunate for me. Which I know it was such a difficult time for so many people, but I just benefited from being locked in and working on the script and reading a lot. But yeah, I guess because I wrote the script, and then we were very fortunate to get the film finally funded in 2021, and we shot in Melbourne in the middle of 2021, which was quite a challenge for my production team and producer Kate Laurie, who was working with Arena Media to get the film up. It was very difficult shooting a film during COVID era and being delayed by lockdowns and things like that, but we made it work somehow. So that felt like a miracle at the time. But I think because the film was developed over a long period of time, it's probably quite reflected in the narrative because it draws from all these different directions and kind of darts in different directions and has a kind of fragmented structure. And I think that was part of the intention, was to create this multifaceted portrait of a time and a place.
It certainly does that. I was really quite intrigued by the way the story develops, and especially that notion of balancing reality, fantasy, what is really happening, what may be happening inside someone's head, that sort of thing. So I'm interested in any particular inspiration behind the way you approach telling the story.
Well, I often say this in interviews, but I think that the methodology of writing did draw probably in some significant ways from surrealist collage. And even though there's obvious surrealist elements in the narrative and in the visuals, the more, I think, conscious way in which I adopted the methodology was really in that kind of collage-like narrative, and snatching bits and pieces and putting them together and seeing what comes in between. So in a subtle way, but I think I used some of that when I was writing and also when we were editing with the wonderful editor that I work with, Luca Capelli. But I think also, and because I wrote and directed the film, because I worked on it for a long time, all kinds of influences came in my way. So I think there's a really broad range of inspirations, and some of them are probably in the film, and a lot of nods to works of literature. And I looked to there's the film at a certain point plays with ghosts narratives, even though it doesn't go that way, and it's not a supernatural film, it's not a horror film either, but it explored that territory. And I think I was very interested in ghost stories, and especially 19th century classic ghost stories, where it's always, sometimes there's not really a ghost, like in Turn of the Screw, you're not quite sure what's going on, and the narrative is sort of constructed to really explore the psychology, unraveling unreliable narrator. And that felt, I was quite inspired by that, that, Petrol is really about the inner world of the protagonist, Eva, and is through her eyes, and it's her confusion and disorientation. So in that way, the ghost story helped me to create some of that atmosphere, I think, in the Gothic kind of elements. It was very fun to experiment with that.
Yeah, no, I find that really intriguing. It's certainly not a standard narrative by any means. So I like that, and I also like that sort of symbiotic relationship between the two women. One the film student and one the performance artist, and the yin and yang between them, I thought was really quite intriguing.
And I guess the two women narrative is in itself a genre almost. And I guess there's also, the double, like all that kind of the double in the 19th century, the doppelganger stories and the Dostoevsky's The Double and things like that. But then the way I guess you see it in cinema in films like Persona and Three Women and whatnot. I mean, they all probably connected quite consciously and drawn each other, but I think I really like the stories, the two women stories, and I felt like I had something to add in that kind of territory. So that was very much the core of the film, the self and other.
Okay. I could also see influences from Eric Romer and Jacques Rivette, in particular, Celine and Julie go boating, that
Of course.
really elusive sort of dynamic.
Of course, yes. And Celine and Julie is an unavoidable film. And there's actually a nod. I really love Jacques Rivette's work. And there is a nod in Petrol to Celine and Julie when the symbiosis of ordering a cocktail and the other one comes out with the cocktail. And I really love that moment. And I kind of just riffed on that because it happens to me so often that, and also that reading into coincidences and reading into kind of random happenings, I think, it can be a little bit sentimental almost, but what I was interested in, I read the essay by Freud, The Uncanny, and I liked how he kind of laughs at how people read into coincidences, but really it's just a sign of a neurotic mind. And I liked the tension of that Eva is always obsessed with these signs, but they don't really lead to anything. It's more a reflection of the kind of personality that she is, who wants to see signs and clues in reality. But it also gives way to the magical potential of the everyday, which is very cinematic.
It certainly is. Tell me, why did you call the film Petrol?
It's a very lateral title, and when I settled on the title, I was certainly warned by wise people that do you really, you'll get asked a lot, why is the film called that, and do you want to take those questions? And I thought about it, and I thought of alternative titles, and I just stuck with this title because it felt, I felt confident with it. And I think part of it is, so it is a very lateral title. It's not directly, no, there is a shot of petrol spilled on the ground, refracting light, the kind of famous rainbow colors. And that is in the film. And I think it does come from that image of the urban, this very ubiquitous feature of cities. And it's this urban environment that is, somebody actually an audience member recently said toxic beauty, which I quite liked, and I was like, yes, that does, and it speaks into the themes of the film. But I also liked, I wanted the viewer to go into the film, you know, they've seen that the film is called Petrol, and they go into the film and they very quickly see that the film is not about that. And I think immediately creating that tension, oh, this is a film where things are not what they seem or not what they appear, and I have to work to make those connections, and I have to be creative. And I think I wanted to indicate that very strongly, that it's going to be a film where you have to bring your own interpretation to it. So the title and the kind of absence of Petrol and the juxtaposition of the title and the story, I think indicates creative interpretation.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. That's a good explanation. Tell me about casting the film, Nathalie and Hannah and the rest of the cast, because they're really very good.
Oh, they're excellent. They're amazing actresses. I was very fortunate to find them and to work with them. It was really a joy. And Nathalie actually just came through relatively early on she put in a tape, and she actually auditioned for Mia originally. And which I kind of liked, talking about the doubles and the reversals and but she didn't actually feel it. She didn't want to do that character. She wanted to do Eva, but she didn't. Her agent didn't put that audition. She actually taped both characters, but her agent didn't recommend her for Eva originally because they were worried that we wanted a Russian actress, which was true. We really were, we wanted to find at least an Eastern European person to play that character. But when we saw Nathalie, we just fell in love with her, and she's bilingual at home as well. Her mother is French, so she speaks French, and that kind of, I felt like that's enough, that she had the connection to migrant kind of experience and that dislocation of language and speaking another language with your mother. So she learned the Russian language lines for the film and did a fantastic job. She has an amazing ear. But then I was looking for Mia for quite a while, and we were getting a bit stuck and stressed. And Nathalie put forward her friend Hannah, and they went to drama school together in Wellington, even though Nathalie's from Canberra, but she went to this quite famous drama school there, and we fell in love with Hannah. So, and I loved that they were friends and they had this dynamic of their own already, and they brought that to the set. But yeah, it was quite a leap of faith for my production team to bring in an actor from New Zealand at that time, which was quite challenging in logistical ways. And, I think a lot of productions didn't want to do that, especially on an indie film like this. But yeah, we did it. And and Hannah is just such a strong personality, and she brought so much of herself to that character, and the way that they worked together and their dynamic, it was really fun. And I think they really make the film what it is.
They are excellent. And yes, it certainly works really well. I'm intrigued, how much is your own Russian cultural background and so on impacting perhaps on the way that you approach the way you make films?
I'm sure it does in many ways. I mean, we can't really deny what we are culturally.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in St. Petersburg until the age of 13, so certainly it's left like a strong imprint on my psyche. And also, all the kind of great, dark, depressive St. Petersburg literature that I grew up with, and I think formed my imagination. That kind of the love of the Gothic, I think, comes from that probably a little bit. But also, and I saw Tarkovsky's films through my mother quite early on. But then also, I think that for me, what always interested me in the migrant experience was not so much the sort of, obviously we've seen a lot of storytelling about the economic and cultural kind of barriers that migrants face, and the challenges, and the difficulties, which all I certainly am not a stranger to. But I think what really did interest me on a personal level was that the sense of rootlessness and dislocation, and the kind of disorientation, and the feeling like you're dislodged a little bit from the world, and you'll never have those roots in the same way that somebody who grows up in one place does. And it's not it's not about nostalgia or kind of sentimentality. It's just about the fact that that is part of the modern world as well. I think that's what interests me, is this constant movement and pursuit of dream elsewhere is very much a part of the modern world. And I think it has a melancholy kind of edge to it, even though we adapt and find our feet in different places. But I think that that feeling of things kind of in flux and lost, something lost irrevocably, is probably always in my films in one way or another.
Okay, no, that's a really nice explanation. I think that's a really excellent view of the way you approach, I suppose, your films and your style. I was wondering, as I was watching the film, in formulating the screenplay, were you wrestling at all with the way the film concluded? Because without giving any spoilers to people, because concluding a film like this, which has so many disparate elements to it, must have been quite a task for you.
It certainly was. And, even when we were editing the film, we were presented with different options, and we tried different things. And in the end, just had to kind of go with something that is relatively close to the script and felt right to me. But there were many ways to end the film that has an open ending. So it was kind of intuitive, I think. But I wanted, the very final, again, I won't give anything away, but the very final image in the film, to me, indicates, again, speaks to the themes of the film that are presented early on, which is being in the process and working, and continuing to work. And so the final image, sort of, I wanted to leave the viewer with that the story sort of ends, and then there's an epilogue. And it has a little hopeful kind of note.
Yes,
that it ends on. And it's also I always knew I wanted the film to be to have a romantic ending, so that's what I worked towards.
Okay,
but it was not easy.
Yeah, I understand, and fair enough. No, you did that well. It always intrigues me. How easy was it to shoot in Melbourne, using locations, that sort of thing?
It was very hard, actually. And after Kate Laurie, the producer, and I, we did Strange Colors together with another producer, Isaac Wall, who also co-wrote Strange Colors. And then Kate and I went on to do Petrol. And, we felt like some relief in being oh, thank God we're not in the outback anymore. We're not, a long way from home, on location, battling the elements, with, a community that we're not sort of it's not our community. Like, we've gotten to know people really well there, and we were very welcome, and we had a lot of advantages. But I think we were very like thirsty to do something on home ground and very excited about it. Then when we got to actually shooting in Melbourne, I had a moment of being like, I know now why Australians always shoot in the outback, because it's really hard to make a movie in the city here, and it's expensive. And I was very ambitious. I was slightly naive. I was very ambitious with the amount of locations, and I really wanted, I think my dream was to kind of, through the narrative and the meandering story, to also give the viewer a sense, to create a record of Melbourne and a certain era of life here, and customs, and the way that people kind of are, different types of people. So it was meant to be this kind of journey through Melbourne. And I wanted to shoot in parks and on the streets and in laneways and in the inner city and like places that I knew, and all these different places, inside and outside. And then it was so expensive to move the crew around and pay parking and pay council fees to set up unit in local parks, and for our team to be tasked with finding those places, and where it was like a crazy amount of organization. But also it was very fun, the finding locations, for instance. And one of my regular collaborators, Lucy McMahon, she actually did a bit of work with another location manager on finding locations, and she's a Melbourne, she's from here, she grew up here, so she was really enjoying being and learning about how creative that role is and how much it can kind of impact the film. And so we put a lot of care into finding locations and figuring out how to do it. But it was very hard. And then not to mention the issues with sound. It's very noisy. You spend a lot of time waiting for planes to pass. Sometimes again, we're very fortunate to work with an incredible sound recorder, Steve Bond, who was just a wizard. But he was really battling the elements and traffic and construction and all the kind of noise that it infiltrates the film and became part of the film in an interesting way as well. But it was certainly a practical challenge.
Wow, it was certainly a challenge. How interesting to hear that process. Now, I know the film screened at MIF and also at Locarno Film Festival, and of course it's rolling out at the Nova in Melbourne on the 15th of June. But what reaction have you had to the film, Petrol, especially from Locarno?
The Locarno screening was beautiful. It's such a special festival. It's like the most pleasant film festival. I could probably say one of the most pleasant film festivals that I've been to, because of its sheer beauty. It's nestled in this incredible spot in the Swiss lakes, and you just, every time you walk out on the street, you just think, oh my God, I am so, I've lived, I've really lived my life now. That was kind of the feeling of being there. I was only there for like 3 days, but it's beautiful. It's in the summer, it's beautiful. And the audience, the whole town is sort of transformed and mobilized to watch films, and it's easy to get around. Everything is really close, and it's very encouraging because people really come, like not just industry people. That's what I really like about that film festival. And it's not as it's not quite as known as Cannes or something like that, because I think it's, even though it's almost as prestigious in its own way, but it's just not as industry focused. So there's journalists and stuff there, but a lot of people from Europe and Switzerland and Italy and Germany and whatnot, just get on the train and go there to see films. And that, yeah, it was very beautiful. And yeah, some of the responses I had from the film were very moving and memorable. And then, you know, it's always different. I think probably the in Australia, I've had probably some of the, in Melbourne, I think I've had the toughest crowd almost, because I think that people really had they see the film in a different way, I think, to international audiences, because I think here people are very you know, they have opinions on how the city should be filmed and how people are here, and they had kind of interesting thoughts to share. Or the questions were, a lot of the questions were about what it was like filming here and why certain choices were made. Whether I felt like, yeah, overseas, probably the focus was more on the characters and story and whatever. Yeah, which was interesting. Yeah, and I think that what I like with this film is every screening, it's a different atmosphere. I think also in Australia, actually, I've had the strongest reactions. Like, people really love the film, or they go the other way, and they're quite emotional, which is interesting. So I take that as a compliment, because I think it's good to have a strong reaction, you know, to draw a strong reaction from your audience. And I've had a very warm reception in New York. So that was just recently we went to New York, and we had a very good audience there. So that it was really interesting and cool.
Great to hear that. And yes, it's great when you have a film that does inspire a reaction from the audience. You don't want a film that's bland and people don't react and they just let it go. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay, so it's great now that the film is releasing in Australia on the 15th of June. And Alena, just to conclude, are you already planning your next film?
I am slowly, but I'm um, dabbling in a story set on the west coast of Australia this time, which has been really fun. I've kind of done a little bit of research into the place where the story takes place, and you know, I'm learning and taking it all in and kind of developing the characters at the moment. Yeah, and it's a tragicomic love story.
Okay. Look forward to it. Sounds like it'll be a really interesting film. Alena, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We've been speaking to Alena Lodkina, the writer-director of Petrol, releasing in Australian cinemas on the 15th of June. Alena, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me today, Peter, and have a wonderful day.
You too. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.